You mentioned to keep up the reading, and in fact, I was reading the AAPG website and the Explorer, which is the main magazine of the American Association of Petroleum Geologists. I read something interesting written in the month of March by David Brown as an article about hydraulic fracturing on the Explorer, and it was mentioning the Senate and the House bill proposing to ban hydraulic fracturing by 2025. What do you think about this very delicate topic about banning hydraulic fracturing?
Well, and I don't want to get off into a political debate on it, but one of the things that happens with fracking, hydraulic fracking, is it's opened up the shale revolution. And what's going to happen is when people realize what's going to happen with gasoline prices, energy prices, and stuff, if you ban hydraulic fracturing, if you look back, we were making about 5 million barrels a day prior to really taking off on fracking. So think of that in the context right now. We make 12 million a day. So we doubled that amount of production. So without that doubling of production, we would be paying probably $4.50 a gallon for gasoline right now. Your electricity bill would be going up. All your petrochemicals and all your other things, your cell phone would cost you more because of the plastics and stuff in them. So the reality is we use a lot of hydrocarbons, and hydraulic fracturing have brought that about where we have an abundant supply. We actually have gone net negative on imports and exports. We actually export more than we import now by a small margin. So with that, that's helped out. And the realization is that if we ban fracking in the next 5 years, we are going to see a tremendous amount of inflation. We're going to see a tremendous amount of job loss in the oil industry itself. And then you'll see it elsewhere around the country when things start happening. So I think it's impractical that it'll be hard to get implemented and really do anything. And I don't know if any politician is going to have the will to really do that outside of a local politician.
Mike, if you will, is a little bit like what we're doing right now with the virus. So you have to balance and decide what is the priority, because what you are depicting right now is like a tremendous negative environment, right? Which is what we're living right now because of the virus. So don't you think that banning the hydrofracking would have a positive effect?
Well, yes, it would in the United States, but you got to realize right now, China and India are bringing a coal-powered plant online every day. And so the atmosphere is the world atmosphere, not one atmosphere. And yes, we can change the course in a country like the U.S., and we've actually got declining CO2 emissions, probably even more so now that we're shut down. Same way in Europe, we're seeing declining CO2 emissions. We have some things that we can do if people. Everything comes with a consequence. You look at biomass. One of the big things that biomass people talk about as being a good, clean source of energy. Well, we're destroying forests. We're basically going in, and you look at where they got big biomass deals. We're going in and we're destroying forests to get the wood to be able to do it. So we're tearing down wood, pelleting, put it into pellets, and burn it to make it. One of the things we've got that's really efficient right now on the plate is natural gas, and we get that by virtue of hydraulic fracking. And natural gas has a very low carbon footprint and can be very useful in making the transition. And I think what we all have to look at is when you sit there and you say that one industry or another industry is pro-green or anti-green, you know, as geologists, we're pro-green. When you really sit down and think about it, we go out, we love to be out in nature. We like hiking. We like looking at the outcrops and things like that. And so, you know, we've always been kind of a pro-green, but there's transitions you got to do. One of the things Scott Tinker does a presentation where we've got 1 billion people that don't even have the basic necessities of life that are out there in the world because they have no access to affordable energy. And they live very, very hard lives with cooking on stoves and dying of lung diseases, respiratory diseases and stuff. So there has to be a balance on everything. And I think one of the things right now, natural gas powered plants, you know, if we could get China to convert to natural gas versus doing coal, we could drop it a lot. So I think we have to be pragmatic. We have to look at solutions. We have to transition. It's not going to happen overnight, but we need to start farming some type of transition. And AAPG is going to be working in that respect. A new thing that's been out there for a while that's getting some speed is CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And with that, we're going to go in and capture carbon molecules at the smokestack out of the atmosphere and inject them down in reservoirs deep in the earth to lower CO2 levels. And that's one of the things that AAPG is going to actually have a conference on and try to lead the way, because if we can pull CO2 out of the atmosphere, that's got to be good for everybody. And so as geologists, we can lead and we can help this transition into a lower carbon world. But, some of the things we got to do have got to be practical.
Mike, when we talk, going back to that article in the Explorer and talking about the ban on hydraulic fracturing, is AAPG, is it mentioned during the debates? The politicians, they come to the association to ask what the association members think about, or there's no connection between the politics, the ideas that they are growing in Washington and the association?
Well, we used to have an office there called the GODC office, which was kind of our lobbying arm, if you want to call it that. What we found is if you're not ready to go to Washington, D.C. with a couple briefcases of money to be able to influence politicians, they don't really spend a lot of time talking to you. We do some white papers and we get involved with them a little bit, but we shut down the GODC office because a small group, even though we've got about 30,000 members, when you're talking about with the politicians and stuff like that, we get a few phone calls and stuff, but mostly they're looking for the people, the lobbying groups that have big monies behind them that can help shape that. And there's places out there like IPAA and other groups that are actually working on that front, but they don't actively come to us for a lot of information because we're not really on their radar screen, and we found that when we had the GODC. But we do offer insight to them when asked, and we do put insights out. I was on a phone call just the other day with a Texas representative out of Houston, discussing some possibilities for legislation in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Which kind of legislation?
Just things they could do to help out the oil and gas industry. They were looking for a perspective from. I have a small company, and so they were looking for the perspective of a small operator, the mom and pop type operator, how they could do it. Because there's a lot of things out there that benefit Exxon Mobil's and the bigger independent companies that really don't help the small mom and pop. I've got like 8 employees here, so we're not a big company where we have hundreds of employees. And so talking about things like, one of the things I think that has a little bit of merit is some of the tariffs that's been proposed. Just keeping, like right now, we got a lot of Saudi oil and a lot of Middle Eastern oil coming into the ports in Houston that are actually going in the pipelines and being pumped to Cushing to store. So we're using storage capacity in the United States to store oil from the Middle East at the expense of people working in the United States.
You were defending the oil and gas in unconventional. Does it mean that there are a lot of members of the AAPG that they work in the unconventional realm?
In Texas and the United States, a lot of them now, and we're about 30-40% international, about 60% domestic. But out of the 60% that are inside the U.S. borders, a lot of those are working in the unconventionals, whether it's up in the Marcellus for the gas, the Marcellus in Pennsylvania, Ohio for the gas, and then our West Texas, North Dakota with the Bakken, and then the Niobrara and the Rockies.
Are the unconventionals going to develop also outside North America?
Well, I think they will. We're seeing some like in Argentina and some other places like that. They're unique in their geology, so they're not everywhere. And so from that standpoint, I think there's going to be areas where they are going to be developed. Like Argentina is a really good example that they're working towards that right now, and some other areas. But we have a unique situation in the United States. We have the Permian Basin, which is almost like 4 basins sitting on itself. We have the 2 Wolfcamp zones, one in the Delaware and one in the Midland Basin, and then we have the Sprayberry in the Midland Basin and the Bone Spring in the Delaware Basin, and all those have multiple landing zones. So it is a unique basin in itself, and I don't know that basin is going to be replicated anywhere around the world.